Good evening, viewers. Good evening, and welcome to yet another one of our programs known as Insight. As you know, I'm Deborah Moore-Miggins, and it's always such a pleasure to come to you in your homes on various topics of interest to you. Tonight we have someone who has never shunned the spotlight and never shunned expressing a view as he sees fit. As they say, he had no muzzle for his mouth. And that is Mr. Martin Anthony George, whom I welcome to tonight's program. It's always a pleasure to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And you know, what we want to discuss tonight is the recent signing by 3 political parties in the Tobago House of Assembly election. That is the Code of Ethical Political Conduct that was signed on to, I think it's yesterday. And we want to explore some of your views on that. But before we do that, let us get some clips from what went yesterday at the signing.
Leading up to the 2017 Tobago House of Assembly election, 3 political leaders have signed onto a Code of Ethical Conduct, which came into being in July of 2014. Overseeing the signing were Chairman and Deputy Chair of the Council for Responsible Behavior, Dr. Bishu Raghunath and Bishop Clive Abdullah.
Basically, what we intend to do is hopefully to try to get the political campaigning for all our elections at a standard that we could all be proud of. And for all intents and purposes, we want to have proper integrity in the electoral process. We want to have respect for law and order. But more importantly, we want to minimize the mudslinging and the personal comments. Focus on issues, focus on what really matters to the electorate.
The council chairman explained it is a matter of parties committing themselves to the practices and principles set out. Signing was the leader of the Movement for Transformation, Ms. Eudine Job Davis.
Code of signing this code for me is just a mere formality. Because my mother would have instilled certain principles and values into her children. And one of these was, as the code says, do not malign persons and so on. We understand, I understand that very, very clearly. She always said to us, never fear anybody, respect them, but fear God.
Tobago Forward's leader Kristen Moore also signed, but voiced initial concerns about the document, which she said first emerged in August of last year, but was subsequently aborted.
We had an opportunity to look at the code, and we had some concerns which we expressed to the organization. One of our primary concerns was that this code was not enforceable, so that you had major political parties in the last election cycle signing the code, but appearing through their conduct to have reached its very tenet.
Moore raised concern of who the code was designed to protect, as she feared the possibility of Tobagonians being muzzled by prohibiting the ability to deal with important issues. Political leader of the PNM Tobago Council, Kelvin Charles, also signed. The PNM in Trinidad signed onto a similar agreement in 2014. Mr. Charles referred to his party as disciplined and decreed the party will behave to the highest standards while campaigning.
You would not hear on our platform the kind of derogatory remarks that you have been hearing from some of the other platforms. Furthermore, you would not find PNM personnel engaging in the kind of thuggery that has been associated with others.
Charles warned if any individual acts contrary to the agreement or the party's code of ethics while campaigning, there are internal systems to discipline such infractions.
Well, you've heard it, viewers. Martin, you've heard it. Now, what are your views? Do you think that this code was necessary?
Certainly, I think it's a very good thing. It's a good step. And when one looks at the parties that have, come together to actually create it in the first place, right? You have the Presbyterian Church, the Anglican Church, the Archdiocese of the Roman Catholic Church. You have the Sanatan Dharma Mahasabha. They all signed on, the Chamber of Commerce. So it's a whole lot of bodies and organizations that came together and said, look, if it is we are going to be having political campaigns, we must try to raise the level and standard. So certainly the objectives are very noble. I've looked at it, and when one sees the way they've set out things, they seek to put restraints and limits on the excesses that could be associated with a normal political campaign.
But how about what Ms. Moore Christlin herself said, whether the question of enforceability is not some...
there's no legal enforceability that can arise here, based on how it's drafted. Yeah. So it's really just a question of moral suasion. So in other words, you can now refer to the code and say, well, look, you signed on to this and you have broken your promise. So in other words, you now relate that to a political party coming to the people and saying, well, look, I'm making a contract with the people. If you elect me, I will do A, B, C. So therefore, if you can't even be trusted at this stage, I guess you can use that pressure to say, well, look, this is not a person or a party that you would want to put into power. But beyond the moral suasion, there's precious little that could be done legally to enforce the tenets of the code.
Because, there's, of course, the law. And one can argue that there's a law there if anybody mudslings to the point of...
defamation of character.
That's right.
Then that's a different
Correct.
thing. Yes.
If you're human rights, this is one of the issues that they said they wanted to address in the promotion of respect for human rights. Well, that is instituted in our constitution. All right. So the question is whether we still needed to sign
to codify this
elaborate thing.
Yes, I think so, because I'll tell you, the laws of defamation, they are much broader and wider than a political campaign. You see, so therefore this here seeks to focus and sharpen your attention to the things that actually take place on a political platform and on the campaign. So therefore they give you that limit. It's not as broad and wide as even the Constitution generally, which has the fundamental rights and freedom set out in Section 4, of the Constitution. So therefore, this here says, look, regardless of what our basic and general rights are, for political campaigns, we are now focusing and honing our attention to these areas and saying, well, look, we all agree in principle, of course, that we will abide and be collectively bound by it. So it requires, a certain amount of, cooperation and unanimity of purpose that, look, all the parties saying, look, it's for the benefit of everyone if we adhere to it and hold everyone accountable to it.
All right, but what Eugene is saying now is that, look, this is a mere formality. I am from Tobago. My parents grew me up with all these principles within me that have been exposed in the document. So what's the big thing?
No, well, I think that's fantastic that she, believes that, and that is within her, and that's all credit to her. But then, of course, if we remember another very, influential former member of Parliament, Vanilla Allen Toppin, and a certain contribution that she made when there was the motion to censure Dr. Keith Rowley, when he was the leader of the opposition, and certain comments and contributions that she made in Parliament. She's also from Tobago. So the fact that you're from Tobago doesn't mean that there is a blanket, cover to say that, look, you will always act in that honorable and ethical way.
And remember, the speaker thought that there was nothing wrong with it. So
with that contribution, that's right,
so
that's because when they tried to bring her before the Privileges Committee, you remember that the speaker shot it down.
That's correct.
Yes.
So the question then is, we can say whatever we want that is within the bounds of the law. And Vanilla could be saying, look, I kept within the law. We in politics, and things have to be said, because at a political meetings, people, if you just go with the staid old issues, you're going to fall flat. People like a little bacchanal.
And the point is, yes, you can have all of that without crossing the boundaries of decency and good taste. And I think that's what we really need to be guided by. In fact, I think this is such a wonderful initiative. I would recommend that Dr. Raghunath and his team try to get the attention of the US electors and, try and institute a similar system there, because they are definitely in need of a code of conduct such as this, because you saw all hell break loose during the course of the last US election campaign. There seemed to be no lower limit. it.
Yes, it has to bind Putin as well. You have to have one preventing hacking or having your agents hacking to the other side.
Yes, indeed.
But the thing is, now we have this situation, and Chrislyn mentioned it as well, whether it may not have the effect of muzzling the candidates because they have to walk within the straight road. She didn't actually put it that way. I remember her using the word muzzle.
Yes.
Do you think that is a valid comment?
I don't think it necessarily has to have the effect of muzzling you, because the point is, if you sit down and you prepare your speech properly, you can find very creative ways to make your point without crossing, as I say, the lines of decency and, without offending in terms of, breaching the principles of the code. So say, for instance, if you want to suggest that, maybe one of your political opponents is either shifty or a crooked person or so, you may just put it across nicely and say, he's a smart man. And we know what a smart man is, but all you've said is he's a smart man, if you understand me. So you can find ways to put it across, and yet still you haven't come out and said, this person is a crook, he's a thief, whatever. So I think it calls us to just be a little more thoughtful and creative in how we express ourselves, and you still have the same effect. You could still have the crowd being entertained, because that's all part of our political scenario, and we can't ignore that. If you have someone who, say for instance, like a Hillary, sorry to make the parallel, but the point is, you look at Hillary's delivery, she's not an entertainer. Donald Trump is a natural entertainer, so he has all this flash and
extreme entertainment. He went to some extreme. Come on, what was this?
Yes,
this is
yes.
So, but the thing is, no. Remember, there was a time when I think there was an exchange between Dr. Delmon Baker and Dr. London. I don't know if you remember, in an election gone by, having to do with some sordid details that we'd prefer not to have been aired. That may have been one time when
this code could have helped if persons would have adhered to it.
That's right. Perhaps
right? You also recall the infamous statement of former Prime Minister Kamala Persad-Bissessar and her friend Mr. Ganga Singh, and about him giving pipe.
Yes.
So
strange enough, what I think this doesn't pick up, and to us who have been on the hustings already, you see that the House campaign. That is where the deadly statements are made that could derail everything about you. It's made by your, as they say, your surrogates in the House campaign. But when you get on the platform, you're pristine, decent.
Yes. But and the thing is, we do know that there are certain political parties that are experts at running a high-level platform campaign, but their ground war is very nasty.
Very.
But the point is, how do you protect against each and every instance of that? If you have 100 people out there going door to door in various districts, this cannot do it.
This wouldn't do it.
This cannot protect.
So, it may be, as you didn't say, a mere formality, but as you keep saying, it introduces that level of decency.
I think it's very important and very necessary in our context.
But we mustn't forget that people are also concerned about the personal lives and the personal values and the personal history of our candidates. It's not only a matter of focusing on issues. We need to know, and we know, many of us know and are concerned about some of the personal lives of our candidates. And that must be raised.
Of course.
That must be brought.
Of course.
And if you could raise it with a nice little twist, as you've suggested, it's like when Chrislyn was speaking, I read it on the paper about the great lie. I don't know if you saw that.
Yes, I saw
thought
that.
she used just what you were saying to craft your delivery
That's
in a different
right, yes.
way. She used Nelson Calypso.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Instead of calling a man a damn liar,
yes,
you say, you know, this is a great big lie. You hear lie.
Yes.
So
yes.
that is
there are ways,
exactly
and I think that you can keep it entertaining and exciting while still not going down to that base guttural level. Because I think, regardless of whatever, Deborah, and it's something I've always said in all my, public statements. I said, listen, we can disagree without being disagreeable. And that's what I think some of our politicians have not yet learned. They haven't understood that, look, at the end of the day, if your bigger picture, if your larger vision is for the good of Trinidad and Tobago, then regardless of whatever opposing views persons may have, you can still express your views, make your point very strongly without crossing that line to start to denigrate that individual as a fellow human being. And I think that is so important. I mean, we've seen examples of it in the parliament before. You recall the classic scenario where there was this member of parliament who got up and he spoke at length for hours and hours and hours and hours, and he's rambling on. When he's finally finished and the speaker calls upon the next member of parliament to stand up and speak, he stands up and he just demolishes everything that person said, in one sentence. He said, "Mr. Speaker, like my friend before me, I too have nothing to say." So it's quite possible in a nice way.
On that beautiful note, we'll take a break. Viewers, just be with us, stay with us. We'll be back shortly with our discussion on the political ethical conduct. Welcome back, viewers. Thank you for staying with us. And as you know, we have in our studio Mr. Martin George, attorney at law and a well-known commentator. I think he's also a member of the Police Service Commission, a return member.
Yes.
So that means they were satisfied with the work. And tonight, as we're discussing the code of ethical political conduct, which was signed by 3 of the political parties yesterday, the PNM, the Tobago Forwards, and the Movement for Transformation, that's Ms. Eudine Job. This code of political conduct, it says, this is what it looks like, and it says it was produced by the Council for Responsible Political Behavior. And in naming the 3 who signed on, there's one who didn't.
It reminds you of Sesame Street. They said one of these things is not like the other, and you're supposed to point out which one it is. Well, it appears that the PDP, for whatever reason, indicated that they were not comfortable with signing the code of conduct.
So let's hear exactly what the reason that was given by the political leader of the PDP. Listen to this, viewers.
Refusing to sign on to the Code of Conduct was leader of the Progressive Democratic Patriots. Elections officer Mr. Collis Brown said the mere fact that the code was developed in Trinidad makes it irrelevant to a Tobago election.
It means therefore that we as Tobagonians don't know how to behave. Somebody from another place, Trinidad, needs to tell us how we should behave within an election. And not just tell us how we should behave, but tell us without asking our involvement as in what we think what do you think the code of conduct should be?
Despite this, party chairman Harrigan Henry said the PDP remains committed to establishing a code of conduct, having pioneered the call.
There is no question about that. We believe there should be one, and we would sign one based on the principle that was enunciated by the leader, that it must be one that came out of the bowels of the parties here in Tobago.
The PDP further promised to produce a code of conduct more considerate of the THA elections. When the document is established, the party hopes to receive support from all other political parties.
So,
one thing that I would hasten to say is that I, for one, would not be happy to see anything that comes out of the bowels of any political party at all. So maybe the party chairman didn't choose his words carefully, but if what he wants is the byproduct of the bowels, then I'm not sure that's going to get us to the place where we want to be.
Well, no, he's saying this came out of the bowels of people in Trinidad. So is it that you're saying you prefer it coming out of the bowels of people in Trinidad than out of a political party in Tobago?
No, what I'm saying is that when you have a code that is set up by, let's look at the constituent organizations, the Anglican Church, which is present in Tobago, the Methodist Church, present also in Tobago, Presbyterian Church, the Sanatan Dharma Mahasabha, they also have a presence in Tobago. Trinidad and Tobago Transparency Institute, Trinidad and Tobago Chamber of Industry and Commerce. Also, we have the Tobago Chamber, which is also a presence in Tobago. Network of NGOs, Trinidad and Tobago Publishers and Broadcasters Association, Communication Workers Union, FITON, Interreligious Organization of Trinidad and Tobago, ASJA, and the Roman Catholic Diocese of Trinidad and Tobago. So therefore, when one looks at it, I think it's an absurdity to say that this is a Trinidad document and therefore we are not going to sign on to it. The point is, if you take things to that base level, how far do you carry the absurdity? Is it that you're going to say, well, look, you're going to not read your Bible because it wasn't produced in Tobago? Or you're not going to read a dictionary because the dictionary wasn't made in Tobago? That makes absolutely no sense. And when one considers also that here you have FITON, right, which is one of the umbrella organizations for the trade union movement. You also have the Communication Workers Union, which is a trade union. Then the leader of the PDP, he represents a union which is headquartered in Trinidad. So is it that tomorrow he's going to resign and say, well, look, because the union is headquartered in Trinidad and because the majority of the members he represents are from Trinidad, he's no longer going to be representing as president of the PSA? We cannot take such absurd positions when it's convenient. When you're talking standards and ethics, those things have no boundaries in terms of race, nationality, creed, geographic location. There are certain basic beliefs that we are all supposed to hold dear as human beings, and certain respects and values that are attributable across the board, regardless of where you come from or where you are going to.
Good, well said. Now, if Mr. Watson Duke were here, his response to you would have been this. The churches and organizations you have mentioned omit the Seventh-day Adventists. That is a powerful force in Tobago. It omits the Moravians, another key force in Tobago. Not only that, when you look at the council itself, and you look at the council members, every member here, save Mr. Reginald Dumas, who I don't think he would be seen as Tobagonian, but out of 12 members, Mr. Reginald Dumas is the only person from Tobago represented. There's one woman represented. So anybody would likely say, look, things like these need maximum participation, maximum input from as wide a group as possible. And if one really analyzes this, I don't think you would get that coming from this.
Well, okay, that's where we will respectfully agree to disagree, right. Because if you look at what it says the founding organization. So in other words, the fact that these are listed as the founding organizers, it doesn't necessarily mean that other groups do not buy into or subscribe to the principles and theories that are espoused. So in other words, I may not necessarily be, for instance, a member of the Chamber of Commerce, but the Chamber of Commerce may express views that my organization may support, and I say, well, okay, look, I agree with that, I agree with this, I agree with the other, or I disagree with that. So in other words, when we have a scenario such as this, you will always have to have a core group to start. If you want every citizen in Trinidad and Tobago to be part of it, to say, well, it's representative, then we know we'll never get anywhere, because you'll get 1.3 million different views. So therefore, what you have is a core group, and I think it's fairly widespread in terms of the representation, because if we look at it demographically, and you look at it in terms of the population statistics, if you think of the members of the Anglican Church throughout Trinidad and Tobago, how many those comprise, you add to that the Methodist Church, you add to that the Presbyterian, you add to that the Sanata Daman Mahasabha, then you have, for instance, the Roman Catholic Church, right? You have Asja, which represents a significant proportion of the Islamic faith, right? And then, of course, the IRO, which represents all the religious bodies. So in other words, you have representation. So even though the Seventh-day Adventists may say, well, look, we haven't had our name here, but by being a part of the IRO, or by having, subscribing to the philosophies or principles of the IRO, they do have some level of representation. So that's why I say the micro dissection of it, to say, well, look, it is not a Tobago-produced document. It's an absurdity, it's a fallacy, and it's something that appears, with the greatest of respect, to be an evasion rather than confronting the principles that are espoused here. Because when one looks at the principles, you ask yourself, is it that someone is going to suggest that, look, a member of the Seventh-day Adventist Church or the leaders of the Seventh-day Adventist Church will say that they don't believe in some of these principles that acknowledge the supremacy of God, faith in fundamental human rights and freedoms, the centrality of the family in a society of free men and women and free institutions, the dignity of the human person. So, in other words, the principles are bigger than the organizations and the individuals.
Principles here may not cover areas of concern, other areas of concern to other people in Tobago or groups in Tobago. All they are saying to me is that it hasn't been shown that this document has had the input. I would think the word bowels may have been unfortunate, and you clearly don't like that. But it isn't shown to have the inputs of a wider cross-section of people, particularly not those from Tobago. Especially remember that one of our pet peeves in Tobago is that we always have things shoved at us. The least that PDP is perhaps saying that could have been done is an appearance of consulting with Tobago people and having their inputs at this point where you're coming to say it's a document to govern the THA election, having their inputs into it.
Okay, and this document was created in July 2014. We're now in 2017.
3 years, exactly.
Thank you. So where was the voice of Mr. Duke since then, complaining at the start to say, well, look, I don't agree with this document? Because listen to me, this document was already signed on by 5 major political parties. You have the ILP, you have the UNC, you have the PNM, you have the COP. So you have parties that had signed on to it. So in other words, what I'm saying is that if one is to take you at face value, then you ought to show a level of consistency. In other words, when they first came up with it, when it was out for public comment and consultation, then if you had started raising your voice and saying, hey, listen, we need greater Tobago input, then I can now hear you if you're coming in 2017 to say that. But if you are now raising it, it just appears to me, with the greatest of respect, and of course I don't know what the motives are, and I'm ascribing nothing at all, so it could be totally erroneous, but it just appears that you come in a bit late in the day to raise that type of concern. And as I said, the principles which are set out here have nothing to do with being from Tobago or from Trinidad, because these principles are universal principles.
Some of them are universal. What I'm saying is he may well say there are others which are not taken into account.
Well, let him bring them to the table.
Plus, as the commentator, I think it's Harrigan Henry rightly said, this issue of the code was raised first by the PDP. I think
for the Tobago elections.
For the Tobago elections.
Yes, that's correct.
And it seems passing strange that having raised it within another week or two, here comes the council with a code. I don't know. I am
No,
like
no.
you.
This code was prepared since 2014.
Yeah, I mean for Tobago. This code was prepared in 2014.
Yes.
And prevailed in Trinidad in the last election.
Yes.
But I'm saying that having raised this issue of having a code in Tobago, this code suddenly arise in Tobago.
I know, but you see, Deborah,
in a place that had no inputs at all in the first place.
I think we have to be careful of going down that road because there's no end to that. There's no end game to that. No. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Because once you are talking general principles, they are applicable regardless of whether you are from Trinidad or from Tobago.
This is what is the problem Tobago people are saying, that we are never consulted with anything, so we have to keep going down that road.
And when it was proposed at the start in 2014, where was Mr. Duke's voice saying that?
Well,
can you show me a clip where he said that?
Well,
you cannot. So my point is, if one is to say that you are consistent in that objection to the code and saying that you didn't have enough input from Tobago, then he ought to have said so. Mr. Duke speaks on everything, every day. Let's be honest. He never is shy of a microphone. He's never seen a microphone he didn't like. So therefore, he had ample opportunity. So I am not disputing the bona fides and the genuineness of his complaint now. All I'm saying is that for it to be acceptable and more palatable, it would have been nicer if he had been consistently making that point in relation to this code over the years. Well, and even when he mentioned the question of a code for the Tobago House of Assembly elections, he did not speak of this and say, well, look, we don't want this code. It's only upon the signing we are hearing ex post facto this as his reason for not signing.
We're going to go to a break now, but Martin, I do not think you can pigeonhole him into what he didn't say then. He's saying it now. Is he the bad from making a point? And we're going to break. Is he the bad from making a point now because he didn't make it 3 or 4 years ago?
But you see, that's what Donald Trump does. And he says, look, don't hold me to what I said or didn't say. Look into my heart. That's the new thing now. You know, they say,
model of politics is Donald Trump. Viewers, we'll be back. Stay with us. We'll be back shortly. Thank you for staying with us, viewers, and we're discussing the Ethical Political Code of Conduct, which was signed yesterday by the 3 political parties.
No, by 3 of the 4.
3 of the 4, thank you. And we haven't discussed the PNM comment of Mr. Kelvin Charles.
Yes.
He made
it was quite a clever little dig he threw in there when he spoke of the thuggery of others. Of course, those in Tobago who are aware would know exactly what he might have been referencing that comment to. And the thing is, you know, I guess maybe that's an example of cleverly using your words, you know, without coming out and naming and shaming, you know. So I guess
perhaps you'll tell the viewers who don't know what you think he was referring to.
He sought to use that method to, you know, make his point. But the thing is, I don't think that any of our main established political parties are in any position really to point fingers at persons, because they all have skeletons in their closets. They all have sins which they ought to go and confess. All right. So the thing is, you know, while yes, we are now aspiring to a higher standard, I am not sure that it should be done in a self-righteous and pompous manner to say, well, look, we are above that. I really don't think Tobago wants to see that. In other words, okay, yes, let's try to level the playing field. Let's all move forward. End of story.
You're right, because, you know, recently, I think it was the UNC who used that very word against the PNM.
To accuse them, yes, in terms of what happened at the Sangre Grande Corporation.
So
yes.
Let's all start with a
This is my point. This is my point, you know, because if they go down the road of pointing fingers, there's no end to it.
Yes,
there's no end to it, you know.
Well, having expressed that, how do you see the election in terms of what do you think are some of the major issues that the parties, now that they've gotten their code of conduct out of the way, that they ought to be focusing on? To what extent have they been succeeding?
Well, the thing is, I would think that they ought to be able to present, and I'll tell you something. I like the analogy and the way it has been parlayed, the idea of a blueprint that has been used by the Tobago Forwards, because of course it ties into their color, blue, and Tobago really needs some kind of blueprint, right? We need a roadmap to take us forward. So that has been their, founding theme, and they've been, hammering on that, and they're saying, look, we need a blueprint for the way forward. When one looks at what has occurred under the PNM for the last 16 years, one is at pains to find some clear guiding principles for Tobago's economic success and to build our viability, our financial viability. I have not seen it, and I mean, it may be that I haven't, looked hard enough. Maybe, but the thing is, you've heard people cry out often enough, saying that, look, you are not seeing that clear vision from the PNM as to where they want to take Tobago. And the thing is, it's not just a question of you going into this to say, well, look, you want to retain power. It has to go beyond that. In other words, what is my plan? But then, of course, when one looks at the bigger picture on the Trinidad and Tobago context, again, one finds difficulty to discern some kind of clear, credible plan for Trinidad and Tobago's economic recovery and our growth out of it. When one looks, and I'm sorry to make the parallels again, but if you think back to 2008, right, 2008, right, the election of Barack Obama, right, you would see that, look, there was a clear plan in terms of trying to revive the automotive industry, right? Then he had to deal with the banks and all those things, but at least there was some plan. I mean, it was painful, it was tough, then you had the crash of Fannie Mae, the crash of, Bernie Mac. So therefore, you had all those things, but at least there was some clear, credible plan. And now, President Obama, upon exiting office 8 years later, can actually look back, and when you look at the legacy, you look at how many jobs have been created, you look at how he brought down the debt, and that kind of thing. So therefore,
healthcare.
That's right. I mean, say what you want about Obamacare, it does provide accessible and affordable health care to millions of Americans who didn't have that before. So at least there is some clear plan. I have not been able to discern that from the PNM in terms of where they are building and empowering the average Tobagonian. Now, it's apparently sufficient as they see it to say, well, look, if you want a fish, come to me, line up outside my door, wait all day, and then maybe at the end of the day I'll open a small tin of sardines and I'll throw it out for you all to share. And you must thank me for that forever. Now that might feed persons for a while, but that is not sustainable, and that doesn't give us the type of empowerment and growth that we need in Tobago. When you look around at Tobago, Deborah, you look at some of the major developments in Tobago. They are not owned by Tobagonians. They are not financed by Tobagonians, some of them not even managed by Tobagonians. So therefore, you ask yourself, how is that sustainable for your people? In other words, we are going to end up being strangers in a strange land.
But you know that you also have to take into account what impresses the people or what people think they need. And if they have bought into this idea that I will line up and I will take whatever comes from that sardine tin and fight to be in a position to get it without being taken to a place where they can see there's another way to do this, then I guess politics of politics, the PNM is winning.
Right, and you're quite right. And I think that's where persons like yourself, who have been leaders and exemplars in Tobago, through this program,
who have such a clear knowledge and understanding.
But like through this program and elevating the discourse I think what we need to do is open the minds and eyes of Tobagonians so that they can see clearly for themselves, hey, listen, is this sustainable? You know, because otherwise you'll end up like the Israelites, wandering around for 40 years in the deserts, and you're going nowhere. Yeah. And I think we've seen 16 years of that. I don't think we want to see 24 years again. You know, so we really have to think of it. And I think the PNM has to do some serious introspection, because they cannot be happy with what their legacy has been over the last 16 years. You know, you hear them and they're struggling to find achievements to claim for 16 years and, I mean, almost $40 billion, you know.
Because that principle of give a man a fish, teach him how to fish. Yes. Is really very relevant in Tobago context.
Of course. And that is our problem.
Yes.
That is the root of our problem, because when you look at it, our entrepreneurial class has been decimated, right? Our business class has been decimated. The small person who would have benefited from a vibrant tourism economy, who could say, well, look, I'm going to start a little car rental business, or I'm going to open a little restaurant, a little, you know, these people, they have no choice now but to go back and join the line for the sardines.
Correct, because they're all now trying to get a job with the THA already working. So all these areas have nobody to say, look, this is where I want to go, and I'll train and build myself to eventually become
get to that point. And, you know, unfortunately, it appears, and I mean, I hope it's not the case, but, you know, one wonders, is it a definite plan by the incumbent leaders of the THA to keep the persons in a state of perpetual dependency, so therefore you get the vote that comes along with that dependency? So in other words, I need you, so therefore I have to vote for you.
And on that, I want viewers to think on those very ponderous words. We're going to take a break, viewers. Think of what has just been said, and we'll come back to you shortly. Thank you, viewers, for holding for us. And we live here with Mr. Martin George, and we're discussing several aspects of the THA elections. Right now, we're looking at some of the issues that ought to be facing or to be exercising our minds. And it seems as though you have given the incumbents virtually zero on the issue of the economy for Tobago. You have spoken in admiration of the blueprint. My question is, have you looked at exactly what is being proposed in the blueprint? Because you could have blueprints and they're detrimental as well.
No, I just want to clarify. I didn't speak in admiration of the blueprint. I spoke in admiration of the concept of tying it in to their collar and stuff like that. Okay. And I said Tobago does need a blueprint
so
for going forward.
Is, have you looked at the blueprint put forward?
I've looked at some aspects of it, and the thing is, there are some that appear to be doing exactly what you suggested, you know, saying what the masses want to hear, appeasing the masses. I've heard of building 800 homes, you know, that kind of thing. You ask yourself, are these things really achievable? Are they sustainable? It sounds nice, it's a very nice sound bite, but the point is some of it may not be achievable.
But she said that she had discussion,
a public-private partnership that is proposed.
Advice,
yeah, I know. And the thing is, all of these things are very good on paper and they sound very nice as sound bites, but the practical reality is usually always very different. So therefore, it's not at all any endorsement of, you know, what is set out in their document. It's an endorsement of the idea that Tobago does need some kind of roadmap going forward. You know, so I just want to make that clear. Sure. Now, in terms of what we have seen otherwise, I am not sure in terms of what is the philosophy of the PDP for Tobago's economic future. And philosophy is important. Philosophy is important because, in other words, that is going to now guide your economic principles. Sure. It's going to guide your fiscal strategies. It's going to guide your investment strategies. What's your thinking in terms of like foreign investment and these things? So I think we need to have some serious questions asked of the political parties, the political leaders, the political strategists within their camps to say, well, hey, listen, all right, beyond the nice, flowery words on the platform, let's get down to brass tacks. Let's get the details. Let's iron out the details of what you are really proposing. Because without that, it's difficult for anyone to make any kind of logical analysis to say, well, look, this thing really appears workable. Because they can all make it sound very nice and attractive. But in other words, is it something that really can gain traction on the ground?
But do you think the rank and file Tobagonian is interested in that? Or is it only Mr. Martin George and his colleagues who think they're intellectuals in this place? Well,
actually, the thing is, the average Tobagonian is much more of a thinking being than the national average Trinbagonian. That's a fact. When you look at it, we actually, I think, are much more interested in ideas, principles, values, and opinions.
And how practical ideas
Yes. And you see, the thing is, what we have to get back to, Deborah, we have to tap back into that which forms the very core and center of our being as Tobagonians. Because growing up, I can tell you, all I knew was Tobagonians were dedicated, hardworking, industrious, progressive, honest, and you ask yourself, what has happened over the years? And you knew Tobagonians in every sphere of activity, in every sphere of endeavor, all over the world. We always achieve the highest positions, even in Trinidad and Tobago, from Prime Minister to President to Chief Justice to Governor of the Central Bank. We've always had it. Attorney General, we've always had that ability. So we need to get back to that and understand that, look, through dedication, sacrifice, hard work, applying yourself, we can get there. But it appears that we've gotten to a stage where, this present generation has been lured by the idea of basically a shortcut to success, a get-rich-quick syndrome that, look, hey, what the elder generation may have had to do, work hard. No, they're not into that. They think that, look, there's some magic pill or some magic formula that they can just, take it before they go to sleep, and they wake up the following morning rich and handsome and powerful.
And if I align myself with people who are rich and
yes, then they will make me that way. It's a prosperity gospel. And in fact, it's actually used in some churches, that prosperity gospel, which really is a fallacy. But it makes you feel good about yourself, and you feel, well, yes, I'm going to make America great again. Something as simplistic and puerile as that has the power to sway people. So, we have to guard ourselves against that.
Those ideas are well chosen to do.
Of course, that's right.
All right, so what else? We have about 2 minutes to close off. What else do you see as key issues that confront us?
One of the key issues would be, how do we approach the tourism product that is Tobago? Because with the greatest of respect to our dear leaders, in the tourism industry, and that's both Tobago and Trinidad and Tobago nationally, it appears they have not a clue as to what tourism about.
Lost their way.
No, sorry. That couldn't be it. They never found their way in the first place. So I don't think they were ever on the right track to even lose their way.
Back in the, well, of course, some years
No, but that wasn't through the effort of our leaders in tourism. No. It wasn't through their effort at all, right? So what we have to look at is, how do we, first of all, understand what we have. Tobago is so unique and so special in terms of what we have. When you look at other islands and you see what they have been able to do with so little, it makes it clear that we ourselves don't understand what tourism is about. To put it in its simplest form, Deborah, tourism is finding ways of pleasantly separating a visitor from his money in a way that he enjoys it so much that he's willing to come back and do it all over again and invite all his friends and family and come back. So in other words, it's about the experience. That's what it is about, you know. So you may not have the best beach in the world, but if you have the ambience, the experience, and the service, and you know, they will overlook little things. I'll tell you, tourists are never really coming here to complain. They don't come, they come to enjoy themselves. Once you give them that experience. So it must start from the way you greet them, the way you treat them, the way, you know, and it has to be something that is a national effort. Tobago has to start making that effort. So in other words, everybody has to be a tourist ambassador.
How does that get into the psyche of the people?
It has to start with our leaders. It has to start with our leaders. So in other words, the leaders have to have that vision. If the leaders don't have that vision, then they are not able to take us anywhere. A people without a vision shall surely perish. The Bible tells us that. And that is what has been happening to Tobago, because our leaders have not had that vision. They don't even understand what tourism is about. So therefore, they can't take you there. They've been fooling you. So what they do, they hop on planes and they go to these so-called trade shows, and you know what they do is all of them, you see them in Walmart and Macy's shopping. I see them. I see them.
No, we have a Sandals, Martin. So
we don't have it yet.
They're gonna say somebody knows what they're about. We have Sandals.
Right. Coming. If they do come, then certainly that's a brand that knows what tourism is about, and we can learn so much from them. Look, St. Lucia, they've just broken ground, I think, for their 4th Sandals. Look at the size of St. Lucia, small little island. They obviously recognize the value of that brand. The brand brings with it, you know, other airlines, it brings other hotels, it brings other services. Of course, there would be downsides, but the thing is, managing these things is what leadership and good governance is all about.
And you know, on that note, Martin, so regrettably, after end, and I do thank you. I think, I don't know why you're not in the race now, because you have shown yourself able to really give the blueprint and the vision, etc. But time may speak shortly. Viewers, we thank you again for being with us, and we really appreciate it. And we must say thanks to Mr. George for coming and bringing his insight into our program that is so appropriately named. Good evening, and see you next week. Good night.